Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third discussion, our first video discussion. First, thank you. Thank you to the professor and to my peers for all the wonderful feedback around my dissertation topic, about the ideas I have for my questions. It's been very helpful. I have to say that this topic came to me in a very organic fashion, and it's developed over time since we started this PhD program. It began simply with a conversation with a gentleman who served in Northern Ireland. And he started talking about the working dogs there and how they would develop special equipment for them, and this would allow the dogs to search and detect for people and bombs. And from there, I took it to my brother-in-law, who served most recently in Afghanistan. And he talked about the dogs in Kosovo, he talked about the dogs in Afghanistan, and he talked about dogs in each environment he had served, and how they were extremely helpful. And I asked more questions of him. Obviously, don't just leave it helpful. And he began to describe to me how the dogs would search in front of the infantrymen. And when the dogs would go out and search, the troops would feel more at ease, because the dogs would be able to do a job more efficiently than if they had to send two troops to the front line with metal detectors. If that happened, there was always the risk that someone wasn't coming home. With the dog, the risks seemed to be lessened. Whether that was in his mind or fact, that was something I thought I was going to have to explore more thoroughly. The initial impression of historiography, as I expanded my research, was that there was plenty of dogs in war, but none for this specific conflict. I found a few pieces written, largely biographical, about a specific dog and handler, about outstanding dogs and handlers who received medals, or dogs and handlers who unfortunately perished in service, but nothing that gave an overview, a wider picture of the dogs in service and during Afghanistan. So I explored more, and I started talking to more troops. And this project has become a largely oral history project. I am discussing with the troops what their view of dogs on the ground were, and what it meant, and what the dogs did. But then I'm comparing it to with what the governments have written, both UK and US, about their dog programs, about what they saw the impact as. And what I've come to the conclusion so far from these interviews is that there's definitely unintended consequences. These dogs provided emotional relief. They provided emotional relief in the form of, that meant two guys didn't have to go out and search because the dog would do it, or emotional relief because the dog allowed for a feeling of home in a very strange and foreign environment. Even down to some of the troops were visited, when a dog was wounded, the dog would go and visit the wounded troops and remind them of just, the small joys in life, we'll say. Now, obviously, this is all going to be framed within an academic context, and that is coming together better than I thought, but still needs some, I think, more thought and academic direction. But these unintended jobs the dogs were doing, of therapy dogs, of confidants, because the troops were talking to them, was certainly a larger part of the impact of the dogs in Afghanistan. Now, looking at the dogs, they are pieces of military equipment, same as you would cover any tank or gun or even aircraft in a historical context. The dogs need to be framed within that context. And that's why I think this paper is going to take two diverging views. There's going to be the military view, and then there's going to be the troops view. And somehow I'm going to bring them together to show how the larger impact of these dogs. Now, when we speak of the dogs, because they are pieces of equipment, they come without rights, and that, of course, does pose some interesting problems and issues that will be discussed. The remembrances of the dogs will be discussed. the memorials in the US at Lackland Air Base, or the memorial in the UK that's just now being built that's going in Holywell, Wales. And that's going to be to all military working dogs, not specifically to Afghan. And so is Lackland. It's going to cover how do we remember and how do we treat dogs as pieces of equipment and living, breathing beasts. Now, obviously, this is a topic I'm passionate about, and I know it needs some more framing, but I'm hoping as I get a few more interviews and as I read through the government reports to frame it within both the view of the military and the view of the soldier in a clear and concise but thorough fashion. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you so much.